Hi, I'm Naveen Day. This is Bridge City News. Here's a peek at some of the top stories we are following. U.S. House Republicans launched their first impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have the details. Social media platforms and streaming services will now be required to register with the CRTC. We will explain why. And road construction has a number of businesses in Lethbridge's downtown barely getting by.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks so much for joining us. The CRTC is now requiring streaming services and social media platforms like Netflix and Facebook to register by November. In an announcement made today, the regulatory body laid out its plan to, quote, modernize Canada's broadcasting framework through the Online Streaming Act, also known as Bill C-11. The goal is to ensure online services are making meaningful contributions to Canadian and Indigenous content. It issued the first two decisions that came out of its first public consultations back in May. Streaming services that operate in Canada and make more than $10 million in revenue will be required to register by November 28th, and certain online streaming services will need to provide to the Commission information related to their content and subscribership. Streaming services and social media platforms aren't the only ones affected by the new policies. Even services that offer podcasts must register. A memorial totem pole taken from a remote Northwest BC Indigenous village and placed on display at the National Museum of Scotland has come home after almost 100 years. Hundreds of members of the Nisga'a Nation celebrated the return of the totem, which will now make its home at the nation's own museum.
For Scotland, this was not just about the process of returning the memorial pole. It was an opportunity to learn more about the people of another nation, to reflect on what we had learned, and make a decision to right an historic wrong.
Alberta Forestry and Parks has issued a warning following the deaths of two people in a bear attack in Banff National Park. The statement says that during the fall, bears are preparing for hibernation and the risk of surprise wildlife encounters increases. It says the animals are focused on drinking and eating as much as possible, making them less alert and less aware of their surroundings. Parks Canada says it received an alert indicating a bear attack from a GPS device originating from the Red Deer River Valley at approximately 8 p.m. on Friday night, and a response team found two people dead early Saturday. Alberta Forestry and Parks calls it a tragic incident, and that the Alberta government sends condolences to the loved ones of the victims. We had quite the wet weekend, and the clouds are still looming over us here in Lethbridge. Angela Stewart joins us now with an early peek at the forecast. Angela, it appears as though that more moisture may be on the way?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So tonight, we're kind of expected to see around a 30% chance of rain, so not too much. And heading into tomorrow, that's kind of the same deal. There's only about a 30% chance of it. But when we're talking about rain, that's kind of it for the rest of the week. Like I said, rain expected to maybe start tonight down to a low of 4. Tomorrow, that rain, high of 14 expected, and then down to a low of 8. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later on in the show.
Great, thanks so much, Angela. Manitoba politicians are making their final pitches to voters today in advance of tomorrow's provincial election. The Progressive Conservatives are expected to release full details of their platform after having released weekly tallies of the costs of their promises. Party leader Heather Stephenson is expected to host the event, which would be her first campaign press conference in Winnipeg in more than a week. NDP leader Wab Kinew is ending the campaign the same way he started, by holding an event in a seat the Tories currently have in suburban Winnipeg. When it comes to reaching emissions targets, there is one former politician who says the UCP and the Trudeau government are very much in agreement. Drew Barnes, former independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, says the bottom line is that the net zero plan is a bad plan that will cost thousands of Albertans their jobs.
You know, the UCP government's making it look like they're talking like they're against the net zero, but in reality, when you dig into it, Trudeau and the federal Liberals are saying net zero by 2035. The UCP is saying net zero by 2050. Either one will cost the people of Alberta 200,000 jobs, billions of dollars of value and prosperity and net worth. Let's call net zero what it is. It is a way to make us all poor without truly helping raise the standard of living for all people in the world.
Catch my full interview with former Alberta MLA Drew Barnes coming up in the second half of our program. Tributes continue for Calgary Flames Assistant General Manager Chris Snow, who died over the weekend at age 42 following a lengthy public battle with Lou Gehrig's disease. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman called Snow a remarkable man whose courageous and relentless battle with ALS has been an inspiration to so many. Toronto GM Brad Trevling, who worked with Snow in Calgary, says he was devastated by the news about his friend and colleague. Kelsey Snow said on social media her husband went into cardiac arrest Tuesday, caused by a catastrophic brain injury from a lack of oxygen, which doctors did not expect him to wake up from. George Reed, one of the most prolific running backs in the Canadian Football League history and a legend of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, has passed away. He was 83. The Roughriders announced Reed's passing on Sunday. Reed recorded an unparalleled 13-year career with the Green and White, retiring in 1976 as the league's all-time leading rusher with 16,116 rushing yards and 134 career rushing touchdowns. Reed was a 9-time CFL All-Star, 10-time West All-Star, and played in 5 consecutive All-Star games from 1970 to 1974. Some Lethbridge businesses in the downtown area say they are frustrated with the lack of communication from the city regarding construction along the majority of 7th Street and 4th Avenue South, which was heavily impacted by the construction and has heavily impacted their businesses. Angela Stewart explains.
For several months, frustration has been building as many businesses say they were left in the dark about construction taking place in the area.
I showed up to work one day and there was construction everywhere. I had no idea, no notification that there was going to be construction all over downtown.
Construction on a multifaceted project began in August, which includes water main work, improvements to pavement, and protecting the cycling lanes. Bone says this has impacted those residents who choose to come into the downtown.
It's impacted which way people come into work. It's impacted whether or not people want to travel downtown.
John Piska, who owns Big John Books on 7th Street, says sales at his store have gone down significantly since the beginning of construction.
It was 75% down, so that means 25% of what we were usually getting. August is our best month, and this year it was not. It was actually 3rd on the list.
Closures on the block of 4th between 6th and 7th Street will be taking place for the short term, and Piska anticipates more problems for his business.
A lot of the people on 4th are not going to be able to have anyone come to their store. They're going to have to go through the alleys, which are always blocked.
The businesses say they're unsure of when construction will be completed. We reached out to the city for comment, but did not hear back in time for broadcast. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
A 37-year-old Lethbridge man was arrested and charged over the weekend in connection with a recent home invasion in Coleman. Robert Dwyer is facing 2 counts of aggravated assault and is also facing numerous charges, including break and enter and commit, robbery, pointing a firearm, uttering threats, and assault with a weapon. Various items were seized from his home during the execution of a search warrant. They included a bat, hatchet, knife, 2 air rifles, 1 air pistol, 3 cell phones, and ammunition. Dwyer was remanded into custody with his next court date being October the 4th at the Alberta Court of Justice in Lethbridge. A 19-year-old Lethbridge man has been accused of luring a 13-year-old girl, sexually assaulting her while she was unconscious, and then sharing the video of the attack on social media. He had his trial adjourned until later this month. On Friday, Lethbridge lawyer Greg White, who spoke to the case in the absence of the accused Sean Cedric Bilo, said he still required more disclosure from the Crown's office. Bilo faces a list of charges including sexual assault, sexual interference, making child pornography, invitation to sexual touching, and luring a child. The accused was released from custody after his arrest and was not required to attend his court last Friday. His next court hearing is set for October the 20th. A Vulcan area man who struck a police officer in the head with a glass jar will serve a custodial sentence, but he won't have to go to jail. 54-year-old Darren Williams was handed a 12-month conditional sentence in Friday in Lethbridge Court of Justice, the first 6 months of which he will be able to serve under 24-hour house arrest. He will then be subject to a curfew between 9 p.m. and 6 p.m. every day during the second half of his sentence. Williams was charged last December with resisting a peace officer, assaulting a peace officer with a weapon, and assault of a peace officer causing bodily harm. A New York prosecutor told the judge at Donald Trump's civil fraud trial this morning that Trump and his company were lying year after year after year to banks, insurers, and others. Trump is dismissing claims that he misstated his wealth in financial statements and called the case a politically motivated scam. In his opening remarks, Trump's lawyer said that the financial statements were true and suggested the proof was in Trump making a fortune because he was right about real estate investments.
Just so you know, my financial statements are phenomenal. They are actually less in terms of the numbers used than the actual net worth. The actual net worth is substantially more. No bank was affected, no bank was hurt. They don't even know why they have to be involved. And they've so testified. They can't believe that they're involved because they were paid back on time, there were no defaults, there were no problems, and it was like a perfect client. This trial could have been brought years ago, but they waited till I was right in the middle of my campaign. The same with other trials and indictments. It's all run by DOJ, which is corrupt in Washington.
Trump isn't expected to testify for several weeks, and the judge says the case could last into December. The U.S. House Republicans have kicked off President Joe Biden's impeachment inquiry. He faces an array of allegations related to personal business dealings, which were spearheaded by his son, Hunter Biden. But the Democrats insist there is no evidence against the president. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the evidence exists, and there is a lot of it.
There's direct evidence, again, of them making promises and fulfilling those promises to the Chinese, to others, getting paid directly by China. There's actually a whole book written about this by Peter Schweitzer that is extremely interesting, that just shows the level of access that the Chinese have, whether it's with our military computers, whether it's with making these promises, promising that his dad will meet with Chinese officials, really using the office of his vice presidency at the time. And of course, now that he's president, that kind of trickles through, right? So I promised you my dad, and then he was making the big bucks.
Lisa will also discuss a top Pentagon official who is being investigated for alleged ties to an Iranian propaganda network. That interview with Lisa Daftari is coming up right after Business News. China is cracking down on every sign of religion and tearing down crosses from churches, removing mosque domes, and destroying symbols of Buddhism. And tough new rules mean the clampdown is getting even tighter. Andrew Boyd from Release International gives us this report.
From September, new rules limit all religious activities to official venues only and prevent the display of religious symbols outdoors. Partners of UK-based Release International, which supports persecuted Christians, say the government wants to bring all aspects of religion under the control of the Communist Party, which is officially atheist. They say the new measures amount to a complete ban on religious activities and are an attempt to suffocate the underground church, where Christians meet in secret to find freedom of worship. In recent years, more than 1,500 crosses have been torn down from authorized churches in Zhejiang province alone. And Release International's partners report a fresh wave of cross demolitions is set to begin. Other churches have been told to remove signs on their walls referring to Jesus, Emmanuel, and Jehovah. Anyone who runs a religious venue must now demonstrate their love for the motherland and their support for the Communist Party of China. Church sermons must reflect China's politics rather than religious doctrines. And any clergy members who refuse face disqualification. The new rules will also make it harder for underground Christians, as those who host them could face severe penalties. It's just the latest tightening of the screws on the visible and invisible church in China. The authorities have been arresting church leaders who take up offerings on charges of fraud, and Christians have been banned from posting religious content on the internet, including sermons. It's becoming increasingly difficult for Christians to gather in person or online. Release International partner Bob Fu describes the party as playing God and twisting how the gospel is taught. And he challenges the international community to take note of the worsening oppression in China. Yet, despite the increasing persecution, by every account, Christianity continues to grow. There have long been more Christians in China than members of the Communist Party. This is Andrew Boyd for the Global News Alliance.
Monday gave us a bit of a reprieve from the rain that we had over the weekend, and the clouds even opened up a bit. But how long will it last? A full look at the weather is coming up next. You know, if Monday was a day off for you, it would have been a great day to enjoy some of the last few remaining days before it gets too cold. Angela Stewart is in now with all the weather details. Angela, I gotta know, what can I and my little dog Mika expect to experience if we head out for some early autumn walks around Henderson Lake?
Yeah, so not sure if you have any of those little rain boots or maybe even a raincoat for Mika, but might be wise to bring those along just in case, as we might see some rain, we might not. There's only about a 30% chance of rain expected to kick in tonight. That'll carry into tomorrow, 30% chance also for tomorrow. Tomorrow, high of 14 there with that rain, like I mentioned, and then carrying on to Wednesday and Thursday as the rest of the week goes on. Those mid-teens are kind of what's on tap. Partly cloudy skies for Wednesday, cloudy conditions for Thursday, and then the weekend shaping up nicely there. Lots of sun, 19, 24, and then up to 28 degrees for Sunday, rounding out, or almost ending our long weekend there for Thanksgiving. Average high for this time of year is 17, average low is 3, 29 degrees, the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 1943, minus 11 back in 1999 there. Sun rose at 7:32 this morning, expected to set at 7:08. That puts us at about 11 hours and 36 minutes of daylight for today. Looking at temperatures and conditions across the country now for Tuesday, mix of sun and cloud for Victoria there, mid-teens, tomorrow 15. Not too bad all around. They've been experiencing some winds and rain there, so it's nice change in weather, I guess you could say. 16 for Vancouver, same deal, mix of sun and cloud. 15 tomorrow for both Edmonton and Calgary. Expected to last midweek there for both areas, so good news there. Might feel some light wind, but not too bad all around. 14 degrees there in Saskatoon there, mix of sun and cloud. Some rain to be expected in Regina tomorrow. About 5 to 10 millimeters is kind of what is in the forecast, what's looking ahead. There's also a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm as we're looking ahead to the rest of the prairies for Winnipeg there. Rain is also kind of on tap for the rest of the week in Winnipeg there. To central Canada now. As you can see, beautiful conditions all around, 29, 27, and 29 for Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. Sunshine is expected for the rest of the week, so it's good news there, and it'll cool off into the weekend there. Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown, and St. John's, 25, 23, 21, as you can see, mix of sun and cloud all across the board there for Atlantic Canada, so nothing too bad. Some great weather ahead. And that is a look at your full weather forecast.
Documents from Imperial Oil show the company and Alberta's energy regulator knew the Kearl oil sands mine was seeping tailings into groundwaters years before contaminated fluid was reported to be pooling on the surface. That event triggered a protection order from the Alberta energy regulator in the spring and also sparked 3 investigations and alarmed area First Nations. Imperial's groundwater monitoring reports to the regulator showed test wells were finding tailings in groundwater as far back as 2020. By the next year, 11 wells showed process-affected water had escaped from ponds. The reports say 4 pumps installed in 2021 to manage the seepage diverted more than 1 billion litres of groundwater. Rogers Wireless has opened up its network on the Toronto subway system so that customers of all major Canadian wireless carriers can connect to it. The company says subway riders will be able to connect to its 5G network while in Line 1 stations and tunnels in the city's downtown core. Users will also be able to access the network in 13 stations on Line 2. The service to all carriers comes after months of tense back and forth negotiations between Rogers and its rivals Bell and TELUS. Auto safety investigators in the U.S. have expanded a probe into engine failures within Ford vehicles. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says the probe will include close to 709,000 vehicles and 2 motors. The investigation now covers Ford's F-150 pickup truck, the Explorer, Bronco, and Edge SUVs, and the Lincoln Nautilus and Aviator SUVs. All are from model years 2021 and 2022. And now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 364 points on the day to finish at 19,177. The Dow was down 74 points to 33,433. The S&P 500 was up just over a third of a point to 4288, and the Nasdaq was up 88 points to finish at 13,307. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.97 to $88.82 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $2.84 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $18.28.12 US an ounce, and silver was down $1.13 to $21.05 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.53 per bushel, barley is at $7.29, canola is at $16.03, and corn is at $8.89 per bushel. Live cattle were up 23 cents to $184.43. Feeder cattle were up 85 cents to $253.33. Lean hogs were down 35 cents to $79.85, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.14 US. Recapping one of our top stories, it was day one of the $250 million fraud trial against former U.S. President Donald Trump. Witnesses at the courthouse say the trial appeared to be more of a campaign stop where he rallied against the 4 criminal indictments against him. Trump is dismissing claims that he misstated his wealth in financial statements and called the case a politically motivated scam. And just days earlier, U.S. President Joe Biden's impeachment inquiry got underway. But do the Republicans have any evidence against the president? According to the Democrats, there's none. But our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says there is evidence in abundance. My interview with Lisa is coming up after this short break. And listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, be sure to visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, visit lethseniors.com/volunteer drivers. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website, lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
The Biden administration is investigating a top Pentagon official for her alleged ties to an Iranian propaganda network after previously saying last Wednesday that it was, quote, honored to have her served. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, from the Foreign Desk, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, Republican senators are calling on the Department of Defense to have her security clearance revoked. So 2 questions here. Who is this Pentagon official, and why does she still have a security clearance?
Great questions, and it shouldn't just be Republicans who are concerned that somebody who has direct connections and communication with Iran's regime is serving in our Pentagon and got security clearance, to your second point. So this is Ariane Tabatabai. She is one of a handful of individuals who have been called out in a recent expose as having direct connections to Iran's regime through their ministry, actually having correspondence with the mullahs in Iran saying, how does this look to you? What could I do for you? Should I go to this conference? Should I speak at this conference? And actually asking their opinion. So they're working for Iran's regime. So why is it just Republicans? Everyone should be outraged. I'm of Iranian descent. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, she's only being called out because she's Iranian. I'm trying to make this about anything other than the fact that she has direct connections with another country, let alone a rogue state. And obviously, we know about Iran's regime and what's going on over there and what they continue to do to evade sanctions and continue to pour money into terrorism and to haunt and terrorize their own civilians back at home with their human rights abuses. But this should be taken care of right away. I know the first reaction from the Pentagon was like, yeah, of course, we stand right by her. We're actually happy she's here. But then obviously second day, there's a lot of pushback, a lot more tension, and a lot of more details from this expose coming out about who she is, what this group of experts, so to speak, was, and how the Iran regime placed them. If you want a bit more background, this group started in 2014. It's almost a think tank that was created entirely by Iran's regime to place these individuals into very high positions, whether it's on TV, in newspapers, acting as experts. So they gave their opinion that there should be better relations with Iran's regime, of course, that there should be a nuclear deal, and that led right into Obama's 2015 Iran nuclear deal. And of course, now again, under the Biden administration, we have a handful of these individuals working with Robert Malley, who is the envoy to Iran. Of course, he is on unpaid leave because of other issues, because he has promised the Iranians many things. And of course, working with very, very sensitive documents, he has crossed the line many times. So a lot to look at here. I know I'm going on, but this is very, very important. Both sides need to be looking at this. Everyone should be concerned that anyone with these kinds of connections to Iran's regime is working for our government.
Wow. Now, sticking with the U.S., the House Republicans have kicked off President Joe Biden's impeachment inquiry. He faces an array of allegations related to personal business dealings, which were spearheaded by his son, Hunter Biden. But the Democrats insist that there is no evidence against President Biden. Lisa, what kind of evidence do the Republicans have?
A lot. I mean, it is a lot. There's direct evidence, again, of them making promises and fulfilling those promises to the Chinese, to others, getting paid directly by China. There's actually a whole book written about this by Peter Schweitzer that is extremely interesting, that just shows the level of access that the Chinese have, whether it's with our military computers, whether it's with making these promises, promising that his dad will meet with Chinese officials, really using the office of his vice presidency at the time. And of course, now that he's president, that kind of trickles through, right? So I promised you my dad, and then he was making the big bucks. There's a lot of evidence out there, of course. I don't think this is something that should be taken lightly. Nobody wants an impeachment. That's a stain on our nation, regardless of what your political affiliation is. To see this kind of evidence is also a stain on our reputation here in the United States. So we're a mess south of your border. We're a mess here in the United States, but that's where we have it right now.
Now, there are reports that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will be announcing plans to seek the White House in 2024 as an independent candidate. He feels that the DNC is changing the rules to exclude his candidacy. Tell us more about this development.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think there are people are surprised, and then yet they're not, because where Robert Kennedy stands, he has actually been a pretty consistent candidate. And he feels as though the Democrat Party has not only shifted further and further to the left, but they're changing the goalposts in order not to include him, because he is not playing by the rules and he doesn't necessarily fit the exact party lines the way that they have evolved and where they are right now. He doesn't want to change parties and become a Republican, so his other choice is to run as an independent. Now, the question really becomes, how will this affect either side? Will this take away votes from the Biden administration if they become the candidate for the Democrats, or will this take away votes from the Republican candidate, whomever that may be? So there's a lot of reaction to this. I know it will obviously change the landscape of the vote regardless, because we've seen this happen in the United States before. If you recall Ross Perot in that election, that was very historic because of the way that it split the vote and how it affected the Republicans in that election. But we shall see what will happen. But I think this will be quite a significant announcement, and we shall see how it will actually affect the election.
The U.S. government on Thursday started notifying federal employees that a shutdown may occur, meaning that millions of workers may have stopped receiving pay as of yesterday, October the 1st. What kinds of government programs, services, and departments are in danger or have already been affected?
Yeah, well, they actually averted a shutdown a few hours before the shutdown actually took place, which is great news for everybody who works for the government. Obviously, we're talking about, think about all these different offices, the passport office and the State Department and the, post, I mean, every single office would have been shut down, and obviously affecting our economy and slowing things down. And again, another stain, right? We're trying to propel things and push things forward here in the United States, and obviously our economy is suffering. Our government has been slow. It's been this ping pong match in Congress and Senate for a very long time. Obviously, the Biden administration not playing along well with Republicans, Republicans not playing along well with the Biden administration, Republicans not playing along well with themselves, Democrats having infighting as well. So there's a lot to look at here, but thankfully the shutdown was averted for now, but that doesn't mean we won't see another one in the near future because of what we're seeing. The pattern is definitely there.
Now, over the weekend, new reports revealed that an organized hacking group affiliated with the Chinese government is tampering with routers in attacks on various organizations and cybersecurity agencies in the United States and Japan. So what kind of threat does this pose here on North American soil?
Yeah, well, they're reaching us. That's exactly what it is. I mean, and we know that they're reaching us on many different levels, right? We know that the Chinese have infiltrated, universities and science labs, and they've even created their own what they call a police squad in New York City. It's not really a police squad; it's really like a mafia that shuts down any dissent that they find among Chinese Americans, and they reach them here on U.S. soil. But that level of access, they've been able to be interns in Congress. They've been able to really access all different parts of the high echelon society here in the United States that are very influential in shaping opinion, in shaping legislation, in moving forward the labs and the technology and the research. Very, very important that they are going into these routers. And from what I understand, and we covered this at the Foreign Desk, from what I understand, the firmware is able to mimic exactly what the router does. So these, what we have to stop it is not really, it's not detecting this as a cyber threat. Wow. So it's really get under the radar. And routers, I mean, we all have routers, right? So this is something that everybody has to watch out for and kind of, get ahead of the game. But the main point here, Naveen, is that we're not paying attention. And we know that China is improving on everything: cyber warfare, their military, their technology, in terms of development. I mean, they have not only learned from us here in the West, they have surpassed us in many ways. And it's going to take a long time for us to learn what they're doing and then to combat it. So this is a multi-step process. And I think the United States and the West in general has to really get ahead of this instead of just chasing it.
Staying with China for a bit, TikTok's parent company ByteDance has allegedly blocked users that have critical views of China from accessing that popular app. Now, that's according to a report that was released last week, and potentially users beyond China's borders may have also been impacted.
Yeah, so think about, I mean, we've been warning about this, right? That's why a lot of us don't even have TikTok. We don't want to give that kind of access to the Chinese. We know that they have the access and we know they're going to use it, right? God forbid anybody should say anything against China's government, because they will come after you, whether you're online or whether you're in China, whether you're in New York City or you're in Hong Kong, they will come after you. And this is a wonderful way of giving them access, of giving them information and letting them come after us. And when we see this kind of backlash, watching the Chinese use their leverage on this platform, it really should be a red flag to many who are on that platform, giving your access and information to the Chinese and watching as they're using it to their benefit.
And in the face of heightened tensions with China, Taiwan recently unveiled its first domestically manufactured submarine. Now, the vessel was christened with the name Narwhal, which is paying homage to a mythical Chinese fish. Lisa, will China really care about this sub, or will they just continue to use their air and naval forces to keep harassing the island?
Yeah, it's almost as if we covered the story at the foreign desk, I kind of thought to myself, this might even be worse because obviously it's not something that they can do to keep up with the Chinese or combat the threat of China by any means. But it almost acknowledges to the Chinese that we're expecting you to invade. So this is what we're doing in preparation for that. They're trying to, flex their muscles, obviously trying to get a lot of help from the West. The West here in the United States, we are overly committed to the war in Ukraine. And of course, reports have shown that we cannot help Taiwan as much as we would want or what we would have done had we not been involved in a war in Ukraine. But in the meantime, of course, there are many legislatures who are wanting to support Taiwan. It's something that's on their priority list, not wanting to sit back and just allow us to keep putting money into Ukraine and forget about Taiwan. So I think they have a lot of support here among lawmakers in the United States. But at the same time, it's not something that they can carry on their own. So the announcement of one, military machine is not going to scare off the Chinese by any means.
Now you're mentioning the war between Russia and Ukraine. It seems like this war is just not going to wind down anytime soon. And President Vladimir Putin signed a decree on Saturday for the military to enlist 130,000 more recruits. That's already in addition to the 147,000 Russians drafted for the Ukrainian invasion in the spring.
Yeah, this is awful. This is going to obviously have a lot of reaction back at home. I know a lot of Russians have been trying to escape the country, trying to duck out of their obligations of the draft, really making this obligatory so that, they can increase their might and their force. But as you said, this is such a dead-end war that nobody wants to fight in it. Nobody wants to go over there. No one feels, that patriotic pull, or there's a small percentage of Russians who do. It's dragged on for such a long time. Everyone wants to see an end to this. Everyone wants to see, that it's senseless. It's completely senseless. And to have more people dragged into it, it's very, very unfortunate, really, on both sides.
And on Sunday, Turkish warplanes carried out airstrikes on suspected Kurdish militant targets in northern Iraq following a suicide attack on a government building in the Turkish capital of Ankara. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so this attack was allegedly claimed by the PKK, which is a group that is of Turkish descent. They are in northern Iraq. That's where most Kurdish. What's interesting about this is that Turkey will always go and retaliate against the Kurds anyway, because that is where they find their enemy to be within the Kurds. So this is a great excuse to go now bombing civilian areas in these Kurdish enclaves to go after them, and again say that, well, if you had this bomb, then we're going to retaliate in this way, and obviously use full force, and something that was completely lopsided, but that's how the retaliation took place.
And turning over to Haiti now, gang violence is escalating in Haiti. So the UN Security Council is scheduled to vote on authorizing a one-year deployment of an international force to help Haiti quell the surge of violence. So tell us more about what's going on there.
Yeah, this is a lot of gang violence. We've watched this evolve and continue. I know the Western nations, including the United States, have asked their civilians to evacuate because they don't see an end in sight. Obviously, a lot of travel warnings to Haiti. And now they may be voting to send help to break up these gangs, to help them move forward in a way that the gangs do not take over, that they do not threaten and terrorize civilians, and that they can perhaps, make some sense out of what's going on the ground over there.
Lisa Dattari is our foreign affairs expert and the host of The Foreign Desk. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Many of us can easily get lost in the ebb and flow of political speeches and distractions. And it seems as though political issues are more important now than ever. Joining me to talk about the political past in Alberta is former Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes. Drew, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Naveen, nice to be talking to you. Nice to be on Bridge City again.
Great to have you back. Now, you have a lot of political experience as well as a life in business. As you see the province moving along after the May election, what are your thoughts on the next steps for Alberta?
Well, the next steps for Albertans, I believe, needs to be more direct democracy. The Swiss people go to the polls 4 times a year to vote on referendums, to vote on ideas, to vote on laws, whether it's putting them in or taking them out. In my 11 years as MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and I was so grateful to be one of the 87 paid to speak on behalf of Albertans, I've consistently heard how Albertans weren't happy with how fast the government was doing things or what they weren't doing or what they should be doing. We need more Albertans to step up and get involved. So much of the system is big and immovable, and it's hard. Effectiveness is not going to be easy, but that's what Albertans are telling me they'd still like to see. Naveen, our taxes are sky high through the roof on everything. Income, property, carbon, GST. Secondly, the fair deal. People I talk to very, very much want to be a strong part of Canada, but they know that unless we get a fair deal from Ottawa, all of Canada won't be as strong as it can be, particularly Alberta. And then again, some direct democracy, more opportunities for local decision making, and for you to have control over your family, your children's education, those kind of things.
Now, one of the issues you've been passionate about is property rights for landowners. Can you talk about how property rights have changed or even possibly eroded over recent years here in our province?
Oh, it's so disappointing. In 2012, one of the main reasons I got involved with the Wild Rose to be involved in provincial politics is because the Progressive Conservative Party at that time had a huge attack, a draconian attack on personal property rights. They actually put in Bill 36, 19, 24, and 50, where they could strip a title without access to courts and without access to compensation. And those bills have been barely modified in 11 years, in spite of the fact we're now in our second successive Conservative government. My last private member's bill was to change that and restore property rights for individuals and families, but it died on the order paper under the last Kenny and Smith government. So shows me the government really doesn't have any desire to make it happen. And why it's essential, Naveen, is how you create wealth and build prosperity is through following the rule of law and property rights. And certainly in Alberta society and Canadian society today, both are under attack.
And that definitely explains why property rights are so important. But what would you recommend to citizens that, what can they do to maintain and maybe recover lost property rights? Well,
main thing is through the Premier, through their MLA, and insist on it. Tell Premier Smith and your local MLA that you're expecting property rights to be enhanced. Well, first of all, restored, but also enhanced, where more and more Albertans have the opportunity to create wealth through owning property and take care of their neighborhoods and their families. And that you're going to hold the Premier accountable. If property rights aren't enhanced in the next 2 or 3 years, it's time to look for a different political alternative.
And then what can MLAs do to advocate for individuals' property rights then?
They have no one better than an MLA or a cabinet minister that has the ear of the Premier, whether it's in the legislature or a caucus or a cabinet meeting. They can absolutely insist on it, and they can pick up my private member's bill, which again just died on the order paper when the election happened in May, that was going to fully give Albertans access to courts and access to full and fair compensation if the Alberta government or municipality went after somebody's covenant legal right attached to a title, and insist on following the rule of law, building and strengthening property rights so we all can be freer and more prosperous.
Now, I want to keep talking about MLAs for a bit because you were an MLA and you were always very engaged with us here at Bridge City News. So what guidance might you provide to both constituents and new MLAs?
Yeah, thank you for that. And number one is for the MLAs and the constituents, make sure the communication lines are wide open. Make sure you're having full discussions. And two things: you're telling the truth, you're saying what you really want, and you're being effective. Um, one of the biggest reasons I decided to step back from politics, for a while, is the fact that the effectiveness was next to it. It was very, very hard to be effective. It was so easy for cabinet ministers and premiers to set up a release valve or delay or not really pay attention to what people wanted. So put in some deadlines and some determining factors to hold people accountable, like the property rights. Today, tell Premier Smith that by such and such a date, probably 2 years from now, you want to see full property rights fully restored. And if they're not, start organizing for a political alternative. And then for the MLAs, number one is listen to your constituents. There are so many good people out there with so many good ideas. And I was always amazed at how many good ideas people would bring to me that I had never heard of or thought of. There's a wealth of knowledge and people that care out there. So my instructions to MLAs is constituents first, process and party second.
Because it sounds like effectiveness was a challenge for MLAs. And then you're also talking about the importance of listening to constituents. And it seems as though MLAs need to find this balance between listening to their constituents and towing the party line in order to keep their seat in Edmonton. So from your time in politics, you're saying that MLAs definitely need to prioritize what they learn from the constituents rather than being solidly connected to the ideology and the party line to solidify and unify the party, correct?
Correct, absolutely. Constituents first. The parties were elected on a certain set of principles, so everybody has a general understanding of what the parties believe in. But the constituents are who you're there for, and they're the ones that will make Alberta the freest and most prosperous place. But it's also, Naveen, why I'm working with a group of people right now to strengthen direct democracy for Albertans. Jason Kenney put in some laws where citizens' initiative referendums can happen, but he made the number of signatures needed on the petition to put in the referendum so onerous. He made the time frame so short, it'll never happen. It was just virtue signaling or some kind of release valve. We need the Alberta government to make it so, I would suggest if 25,000 of us sign a petition, we can put in a law or take out a law. In Switzerland, 8.4 million Swiss, if 50,000 of them sign a petition, they can actually do this. They also have referendums just in a general directional setting way for which they'd like to see the government do. If it's a constitutional change, then the barrier for the number of signatures is higher, and that probably makes sense. But the barriers that the UCP and Premier Kenney set up are far too onerous. It'll never happen. So I guess the whole idea of that is give your MLA a chance to represent you and deliver a free and prosperous Alberta, but you got to hold them accountable. And if they won't do it, direct democracy for Albertans so we can do it.
Because it almost seems like parties are united on for different reasons. Like it seems like more like of the left-leaning parties are united because they think alike, whereas more of the right-leaning parties, they unite because they think independently. Is that a challenge for right-leaning parties?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is, and potentially we're more independent and more issue-based, but we also forget, though, that the large number of Albertans are family and fiscal and constitutional conservatives, and that's where we should focus. I mean, one of my big regrets is not completing the mission. And yeah, I had a lot of good victories. I helped lots of Albertans and constituents on the way. But when I was first elected in 2012, Danielle Smith and I stood beside each other, and Alison Redford was spending $42 billion a year. We thought that was way too much government, taxes way too high. Now Premier Smith in her first budget is spending $68 billion. I can't add those two things together. Healthcare was a prime example. Healthcare, the combination of Alberta Health Services and Alberta Health, who pays the doctors, next year is going to be over $26 billion. Seemed like whenever I was in committee in Edmonton, whenever we were questioning Alberta Health Services, the Alberta Health Minister would never be there, and vice versa. When we're questioning the Health Minister, Alberta Health Services wouldn't be there. It was a perfect wall of not being able to hold people accountable and get to the truth and the ideas and those kind of things. These are the things that Albertans have to insist on change, and MLAs and Premier has to deliver it. And if they do not, then we have to work for change and direct positive change with more direct democracy for Albertans, I think, is the way to go.
So what do parties need to do to provide more allowance for MLAs to advocate for their constituents?
Yeah, thank you. Free votes in the legislature, absolutely. They used to say that they liked free votes, but if you were ever going to vote against them, you had to tell them why. It's very, very strong. So they need to make it truly free votes. If an MLA wants to stand up and do something on behalf of their constituents or vote a certain way, they need to let them. Secondly, we need way more private members' business in the Alberta legislature. We only do that, I think it's 3 hours on a Monday. A lot of those Mondays get canceled because of long weekends or the government plays with the schedule. In my 11 years, I only had 2 private members' bills. One was defeated on second reading. I tried to make FOIT more affordable for not-for-profits. The PCs way back in 2013 killed that on second reading. And my second one died on the order paper. So in 11 years, I should have at least had 11 chances to do something for my constituents. And I sort of got one. Anyway, so yeah, that's the second thing, more private members' business. And potentially we need some situations where in caucus, everybody can speak freely. Also, it's very, very tightly controlled what your question is about, what you talk about, what your speech is. We need to give MLAs more opportunity to ask and talk about what their constituents want them to talk about, not what the party wants them to talk about.
And you've been working on your political action committee. What are your plans for using this to engage people and advocate for the best for Albertans?
Thank you. Yeah, we've talked to a lot of Albertans that are really interested in doing this, and through things like political action committees, foundations. I look at how America's got some very, very active organizations like Prager University, or it's called PragerU now, or the Hoover Institute. Those are the things that we're looking at, we're pursuing, we're talking to people about, and it's been pretty exciting so far. At the end of the day, we need Albertans to understand what's achievable, and it's our province, it's our system. So much is achievable. And then secondly, at some point, we're going to need the political power. We're going to need the seats, people in the legislature that will make this happen. That's on the back of our minds too.
So now you're neither part of the UCP or the NDP, but based on what you've been seeing and hearing, what is your advice to the NDP and the UCP?
Well, let's start with Premier Smith and the UCP. Number one, we need a government that spends less so they can tax less. This carbon tax, I mean, the fact that we pay so much carbon tax through our tier one carbon tax, like our fertilizer makers, our potato plants, they pay tons of carbon tax, and then the provincial government just recirculates it into renewables. My goodness, look at how expensive our utility bills have become. Let's truly and legitimately end the carbon tax, and let's make sure that the cost of utilities becomes affordable. Secondly, competition in business. The relationship is too cozy between big business and government. I tried to change some of the lobbying rules about a year ago, so making it so lobbying had to be more transparent, a little more rules around who could lobby and who couldn't. Absolutely. We need to make it so there's less people up there asking for your hard-earned tax dollar. Thirdly, the fair deal. I'm getting a little tired when I see all the premiers get together and yell at the prime minister for more money, and as soon as he gives them a bit more, they all be quiet. It is time to legitimately tell Ottawa we demand a fair deal. And Naveen, the best way I think to do that is we tell Ottawa 3 years from now, we're going to have an independence referendum. Ottawa, you've got 3 years to give us a fair deal, and we'll let Albertans decide if the deal is fair or not. And also speak the truth and speak in a truthful way. As an example, this net zero discussion that the Premier and the Prime Minister are having right now is so wrong. The UCP government's making it look like they're talking like they're against the net zero, but in reality, when you dig into it, Trudeau and the federal Liberals are saying net zero by 2035. The UCP is saying net zero by 2050. Either one will cost the people of Alberta 200,000 jobs, billions of dollars of value and prosperity and net worth. Let's call net zero what it is. It is a way to make us all poor without truly helping raise the standard of living for all people in the world. And let's start to call the truth, and let's work on that. And again, it's back to effectiveness. I'm so honored and so grateful to have represented Cypress Medicine Hat and Albertans for 11 years. But at the end of the day, the mission's not complete, and I'm looking for effectiveness.
Well, you certainly sound busy, even though you don't have a seat in Edmonton. So, Drew, do you have a website or a way for people watching to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to connect with me would give me a text, give me a phone call at 403-581-1443. I'd love to hear. Twitter, Facebook, and you're going to start to see some political action stuff come out when we're fully registered, and some foundation stuff. And we're going to keep moving forward. But I'm easy to find, so thank you.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. But Drew, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for Bridge City News.
That was Drew Barnes. He joined us from his office in Medicine Hat. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.